Good morning, Dog Nation. I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Let me just say it is great to be back in our studio again. After a couple of days of being away, trying to get some infrastructural work done around here. Seems like that all went really well. They don't let me touch stuff like that. Best I can tell, though, it did go well. I know we are fired up and ready to go for a great season, and it just occurred to me, I believe this is true. I don't know if that the actual date lines up just perfect, but it was game week 10 years ago that we began DawgNation Daily. So for all intents and purposes, while we're celebrating our 10th anniversary season, this is basically roundabout the official 10th anniversary for DawgNation Daily. And it's been the best 10 years of my life, professionally speaking, no doubt. Can't wait for another 10 years, to hopefully many more decades after that, talking Georgia football with as many of you that will give me the privilege of being able to do it. And we are very excited about today's show. There is one thing, and maybe only one thing, but I would say one pretty sizable thing that Georgia can prove against Marshall. I think it needs to if it can. We will talk about that. On Friday's show, we talked about freshman players that I thought could make an immediate impact for Georgia. We'll do some of that today with some of those second-year guys who I think could also have fortunes on the rise here for this season. Jon Stinchcomb will join us, and in addition to that, a little bit of an early preview of a handful of games for this upcoming weekend that I know Georgia fans have their sights set on. It is a lot of football, as much as you can take over the course of the next few minutes. We are glad you are with us for it. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, viewed to be the best.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
We are going to talk so much Georgia football today, and I can't wait for all of it. For a couple of seconds here off the top, will you just indulge me on something? We live in the golden age of sports documentaries. There are so many of them right now. In fact, there are more than you can consume. You can't consume them all, and sometimes I feel like because I can't consume them all, it's just so overwhelming that I end up not really watching any of them. I don't know why that is. Probably just weird with me. I would like them all, but since I can't see them all, I just kind of ignore the entire genre because it's just so overwhelming. And yet, for whatever reason, on Saturday, I typically wake up pretty early, usually before the rest of my family wakes up, even on the weekend. I was just sitting there and enjoying some coffee, and I kind of stumbled into the Netflix documentary, maybe you've seen it, about Jerry Jones and the Dallas Cowboys. And I'm not a Cowboys fan. This is not typically the kind of thing I would get interested in, but for whatever reason, I did get interested in this. And I want to tell you just a quick story and relate it to Georgia football, and then we're going to move on and get ready for the season opener on Saturday. So Jerry Jones owns the Cowboys. They're on the rise. The draft picks are clicking. Everything's working. They're getting ready for a big season, they thought, in 1992. This is kind of early era Jones and the Cowboys, pre-Super Bowl championships for them. And before that season began, the documentary lets us know that Jones decided to host at the old Texas Stadium a big pep rally to begin the season. NFL teams don't typically have pep rallies. The Dallas Cowboys in 1992 apparently did. In the documentary, here's what Jerry Jones said: that he wanted to create what he called a collegiate environment for celebrating his Cowboys before that very big season began for them. And for whatever reason, I really thought about that particular phrase from Jerry Jones. Here's the thing. Many of you know this. The Dallas Cowboys are essentially the most popular team in all of American team sports. It's difficult to quantify just how popular they are. Compared to the typical NFL team, compared to any sports team, the Dallas Cowboys have a remarkable level of popularity. And yet in that moment, Jerry Jones, the owner of the Dallas Cowboys, said, I want our popularity to feel like college football. In other words, there is no college team, our team included, the Georgia Bulldogs, as popular as the Dallas Cowboys. And yet the Dallas Cowboys, more popular than any college football team, said, yeah, but we're jealous of the way the college football popularity feels. We want our team to feel that way. We have more fans, but our fans don't quite do what college fans do, and we want some of that. Therefore, we're going to have a pep rally. Now, all of that is said by me to simply remind you of this. The special brand of college football fandom, the way we express our love for college football, that returns on Saturday, and it means something. It's noticeable. Even the NFL sometimes wishes they had more of that kind of thing. I remember the first season opener. I don't know if it's the first season opener for Georgia I attended. It is the first season opener I remember attending. It was in 1986. It was against Duke, weirdly enough, and strangely enough, the Duke coach was Steve Spurrier. That's the first season opening game I remember going to. And Georgia that year was no special team. They went, 8-3, I guess. Went to the Hall of Fame Bowl, a bowl that no longer exists. This wasn't a special team. It wasn't a magical season, but it was college football. And I fell in love with it. Then I still thankfully love it just as much now as I ever did. Even those on the outside of it, be it the NFL, other sports, they know what makes our sport special. The unique pageantry, the unbridled passion. And on Saturday, no matter how this season ends, we get to begin and experience all of this all over again. And I hope that you are just as ready for it as I am. Now, shifting gears, let me talk to you about what I think we're going to see on Saturday. And generally speaking, there may be only one thing that Georgia can truly prove against Marshall. Let me explain why I feel that way. You probably know Georgia is a gigantic favorite on Saturday. The number I believe I've seen, 39.5 points. Now, one of the things we've talked about a lot over the years, I think you've maybe even heard others say this too, is that when it comes to non-conference games at home as nearly a 40-point favorite, Georgia almost never covers those spreads. It's just not something that Georgia does very much. It has almost been a guarantee that Georgia won't do that. However, I would be careful assuming that is once again true for Georgia on Saturday for a simple reason, and we're going to use some context clues to try to figure this out. You may remember at the end of last season, Charles Huff, this is the former Alabama running backs coach who had been Marshall coach, left Marshall to go to Southern Miss. Now, if we're being honest, Southern Miss is not typically a destination job. So if you're leaving Huntington, West Virginia to go to Hattiesburg, Mississippi, you're probably telling me more about what you're running from than what you're going to because, let's face it, a couple of years ago, Buster Faulkner left Southern Miss as its offensive coordinator to come to Georgia just to be an analyst. That sort of gives you an idea. The road kind of runs one way in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, typically speaking, and I'm not making fun. I'm just being honest. That's kind of the way that typically goes. So if Huff leaves Marshall to go to Southern Miss, probably for a reason. We know shortly after that, almost the entire team decided to transfer. So much so that almost like a COVID situation, Marshall didn't play in its bowl game, kind of an embarrassing situation. And then in the aftermath of that, they have replaced almost all those players totally with transfers. This is remarkably almost an entirely new roster made up of transfers. This was also not thought to be a banner year in the transfer portal market. We would assume that Marshall not exactly getting its pick of the litter. There is a chance that on Saturday we see remnants of what might be the worst team in FBS this year. As outlandish of a claim as that is, let's see if that's true. In fact, it wouldn't surprise me if Marshall's worse than Austin Peay. That's not typically the case. A couple of years ago, Marshall beat Notre Dame. Early 2000s, Marshall came in here, and I think that's the only previous time Marshall's been here. That was actually a close game with Georgia on that particular Saturday. This week, though, I don't assume that's the case. And so because of that, because Marshall's not good, this is not as sexy a week one matchup as others that we'll see across college football and that we will talk about on today's show. It sort of seems like there is nothing for Georgia to prove in this particular game. And yet, If that's the assumption, I believe that assumption is wrong. There is one thing I want to see from Georgia on Saturday. It's the same thing that most of us wanted to see from most of the games that Georgia played a year ago. Can this team get off to a faster start? This was notoriously a problem for Georgia in 2024. Slow starts offensively oftentimes led to deficits, most notably against Alabama, where you had to come storming back to give yourself a chance to win, ultimately falling short. Georgia Tech at the end of the season, thrilling game, but a game made too thrilling because of the fact that Georgia waited so long to really enter the competition on that Black Friday night. This was a big issue for Georgia in 2024. We would like to believe that Georgia will be better when it comes to that particular issue in 2025, and the first chance to prove that is against Marshall on Saturday. Now, we know that Georgia is also thinking about this too, because the other day when Mike Bobo, the Georgia offensive coordinator, met with reporters, he talked about kind of why he thinks that Georgia has not gotten off to a fast start and maybe what it would take to be better in that category moving forward. This is what Bobo said a couple of weeks ago.
There's no doubt. Anytime you start a football game, you want to start fast. We always talk about starting fast at the beginning of each half and the last end in the half as well. You go through it, and a lot of times a lot of it was execution issues. And then sometimes, to be quite frank, it was a little bit being conservative in those situations. And then the other side of it, the teams we played were pretty good on defense and, stopped us early in games. But that's been a big point of emphasis of ours. There's several of them, but starting fast is one of them. And you'd like to start fast every day. And sometimes every game, but sometimes starting fast, does not necessarily, mean, your touchdown, or, touchdown, field goal, touchdown. Sometimes starting fast is, you get a couple first downs and you change the field position. When you go 3 and out to start games, that's something we definitely got to improve on.
So we told you a couple of weeks ago that I thought that Mike Bobo's press conference was really very good. One of the rare times we get a chance to hear from him, and that answer is a good example why. I think Bobo owns it pretty well what Georgia didn't do when it comes to fast starts last season and why sometimes it didn't happen. Even admitting, and this is not the sort of thing you typically hear an offensive coordinator say very much, occasionally we may have just been too conservative. I think that's interesting. I'll take Bobo at his word on that, but it's really introspective, I guess. It's really honest. It's candid, and I think that's really valuable. Bobo also says, hey, fast start's maybe not always what you necessarily think that it is. Okay, well, let's talk about what realistic and what the definition of a fast start would be for Georgia on Saturday. And as a lead into this, let me give you a little bit of extra context just for a moment. We said last year, Georgia notorious for not getting off to fast starts. And yet, did you realize in 2023, early in that season, the same thing was also true? And what's remarkable about that is this is a Georgia offense in 2023 that was statistically among the very best in college football. Georgia averaged more than 40 points per game in 2023. This was an elite offense with Mike Bobo as the offensive coordinator, but slow starts were also a problem in 2023 as well, including in the kinds of games that Georgia's going to play on Saturday against Marshall. Let me give you, for instance, season opener in 2023 against UT Martin. Do you remember that Georgia scored just 7 points in the first quarter of that game? The following week against Ball State, in the first quarter, Georgia scored 0 first quarter points. In the first quarter against UAB 2 weeks later, an overmatched opponent, similar level to Marshall, we would believe, Georgia scored just 7 first quarter points. And those slow starts against overmatched competition were also foreshadowing as well Georgia's early SEC games that season. where it only scored 3 first-half points against South Carolina, found itself having to come back from a deficit to secure a win. Against Auburn, it scored no first-quarter points also, once again had to play strong late to pull out the win on the road at Jordan-Hare Stadium, a place it visits once again here this year. So it's not just in 2024 where Georgia got off to slow starts offensively. It was also in 2023 too where that thing happened. So what does that mean for Saturday? I would suggest let's not worry about 39.5 points as a spread. By the time you get to the late game scenario as a very big favorite, neither team is quite what they were to begin the game. Focus has waned. If you follow gambling, you're familiar with the word variance. By the time you get into a second half of a 40-point game, there's a pretty high level of variance, and whether Georgia covers that spread or not becomes a little bit random, kind of like a pinball machine almost. But what's not quite so random is the beginning of the game. And if we want to define exactly what a fast start would be for Georgia on Saturday, we could look this up. Our friends at FanDuel, I saw them this morning, they make Georgia a 9.5-point favorite in the first quarter. And to me, this is the one thing Georgia could prove on Saturday. Can Georgia cover the first quarter spread? And by the way, this isn't solely on the offense. We live in a new world in college football now where the clock rules limit the possessions that you have. In the beginning of the game, you're not really guaranteed 2 full possessions in the first quarter if your opposition sustains a drive. So in other words, let's say that you win the opening toss or win the toss, decide to take the football. Georgia probably won't, but let's say you do. You have your drive, then the opposition has its drive. If they go on a drive, it's possible to limit what you can then do on your second possession in the first quarter. In other words, if you want to be up 10 points in the first quarter at least, or 14 points, you better not only score on the 2 times you touch it, you better pretty quickly limit your opposition's drive as well, which is another reason why this first quarter spread on Saturday for me is so interesting. It's 9.5. Could Georgia be up 10-0? That's not what they did in these sorts of games in 2023 against UT Martin, against Ball State, against UAB. In 2024, a little bit different opening start to the season last year against Clemson, but it was also a notoriously slow start too. They didn't do this a lot last season either. So it's a overmatched opponent, we believe, in Marshall coming in on Saturday. But if you're thinking first quarter spread, you're not playing your opponent as much as you're racing against the clock. Can you score twice? Can you stop them 3 and out? Something along those lines. If you can, all of a sudden now this is Georgia doing what it really hasn't done a lot over the course of the last couple of years. And in a game in which it seems like Georgia might not have much to prove because of who it's playing, that I think would be a pretty interesting takeaway for most of us. My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. So we'll see. Can Georgia get off to a faster start on Saturday? Certainly hope it can. Covering a 9.5-point first quarter spread, I think that'd be kind of a nice thing to see. We'll see if Georgia is indeed able to do that. For all of you tuning in, video, radio, Athens Sports Radio 963F podcast, Apple, Spotify, everything else, thrilled that you were here, thankful for, and so appreciative of our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia who make it all possible. Now, I got to tell you, walking around today a little bit outside before the show began, I got to tell you, the weather was amazing. I mean, amazing weather. So pleasant, so nice, unusual for this time of year. It has been really hot the last few days. It will be really hot again. And when it gets cranked up like that, super hot outside, of course, on the inside, you want to feel cool and comfortable. And the best way to do that is making sure the air conditioner that you're paying for is not escaping out of poorly fitted or just old windows that create these zones of discomfort around your house. You don't want that. Our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia can help you prevent that. In fact, they're energy efficient, really well designed, creative, technologically advanced windows going to make your house feel incredibly cool and comfortable this time of year on the inside. They're also going to look great on the outside. And honestly, it's curb appeal that oftentimes matters, especially when you go to sell your home. It's that first 5 seconds when someone drives up that tells the tale of what a house is. And if someone drives up, looks at your home, and they see these incredible new windows, amazing technological design, the creative touches that these Pella windows have, well, that's a pretty strong indicator that the person that's owned this home has taken the best possible care of the home. And that allows you in a resale situation to win the battle of the first 5 seconds. Very little is actually more important than just that immediate impression with the curb appeal. And these great Pella windows, I think, give you a chance to do that. That would be my opinion anyway. So I'm going to invite you to reach out to our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia. It's probably time for you to consider a window upgrade. You love your home. You want to take great care of it. It's where you make your memories. It's where you have probably the greatest source of your financial investment. That means protecting it, really learning why an upgrade to Pella windows would be such a good thing for you. Our friends at Pella want to tell you all about that. Find them online, PellaGA.com/DawgNation. That's PellaGA.com/DawgNation. You can also give them a call, 678-638-1429. That is 678-638-1429. Pella Window and Door of Georgia is going beyond. Okay. Let me give you a couple of programming notes here just for a moment. First of all, this is self-serving, but I'm going to tell you anyway. I don't know that the date is the official date, but I was saying this to our video audience a moment ago. We began this show 10 years ago, the week of Georgia's first game there in that 2015 season. So with this being the Monday of Georgia's first game week, this is actually the 10th anniversary officially of DawgNation Daily, and I'm really proud of that. What an amazing decade this has been for me. God willing, good health, hopefully. I plan on doing somewhere, somehow, whatever the technology looks like, whatever the platform is, somehow, some way, a Georgia football show for the rest of my life. But boy, the first 10 years of doing this have been an amazing thing. And I just appreciate all of you who have been with us on a portion of this journey the entire time, whatever your story is. Thank you for being a part of our story. I honestly could not do it without you. I mean this as sincerely as I'm capable. You all mean the world to me, and I really appreciate that. Now, let me also give a couple of small programming notes here, and then we're going to roll on and get ready to bring on Jon Stinchcomb in just a moment. And I'm going to go in sequential order, starting with tomorrow. Tomorrow, we're going to be out and about doing the show live from the Cercheros in Alpharetta. We think that Cercheros is an awesome game day option for you. And we want to celebrate the start of the season and all those folks who use Cercheros for their watch parties and their tailgates and just everything that makes this time of year so much fun. Cercheros is a great option. It's also, if you just want to go have a great lunch, I'm talking about made fresh for you in the store right there. Get your veggies grilled, all that great stuff. Well, Cercheros is awesome for you on that too. So we want you to be there with us tomorrow. Now, our show is going to start at its normal time, of course. Cercheros in Alpharetta opens at 10:30. So you can come in and join us while we're doing the show. We'll hang out with you a little bit after the show. We're going to do some fun stuff with the Cercheros. It's 91 South Main Street in Alpharetta. Live broadcast tomorrow of DawgNation Daily from the Cercheros in Alpharetta, 91 South Main Street. And of course, Cercheros will be a big part of everything we do with DawgNation game days throughout the entire year. We love our friends at Cercheros. We'll see you in Alpharetta tomorrow, 91 South Main Street. All right, now, after that, coming up on Thursday, you know how excited I am to be a part of the great season kickoff event with the Red and Black. You know, the Red and Black is the great student newspaper, really one of the more famous student newspapers in the entire country. The student newspaper for the University of Georgia, they're hosting an awesome season kickoff event on behalf of our friends at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. I've been invited to moderate this. It's going to be me, Tony Barnhart, Mr. College Football. How about David Pollack and Mark Schlabach from ESPN? It's going to be at Authentic Brewing in Athens. The tickets are $25. Now, let me give you the best way to get to the event and get your ticket to see us there on Saturday at Authentic Brewing. If you'll go to bit.ly/DawgNation, you know what bit.ly links are. Oftentimes you see them on social media. If you go to bit.ly/DawgNation, that's the easiest way to get the link, to get to the tickets, see you there, and all the proceeds support the Red and Black, the great student newspaper of the University of Georgia. Mark Schlabach, Tony Barnhart, David Pollock. I'm moderating. Going to be a great time with the red and black on Thursday. One more time, bit.ly/DawgNation. That's a bit.ly link to take you to the site to get the tickets, bit.ly/DawgNation. You can get your tickets. We'll see you there for the season opening kickoff with our friends at the Red and Black coming up on Thursday. Now, one final thing. Of course, you know DawgNation Invasion set to go sailing on September 13th in Knoxville, the first real big game of the season for Georgia at Tennessee. Paddle Wheel Riverboat Tailgate. I'm hearing from folks every single day that want to be here and be a part of that with us on the Tennessee River. Well, guess what? Final kind of call here to get folks in, get involved, be a part of this. We are selling tickets left and right, and we're kind of right up there against the limit. So act now to get yours. DawgNation.com/tailgate. Buffet on the bus. There's a bar, drink tickets. You can get a chance to enjoy the beverages, hang out with Dawg Nation folks, live shows that day, best Georgia fans you ever tailgated with, all of that coming up on September 13th. DawgNation.com/tailgate. DawgNation.com/tailgate. Get your Dawg Nation Invasion t-shirt. Have a lot of fun. We'll see you there for the Dawg Nation Invasion on the Tennessee River. All right, so a lot of stuff coming up. We can't wait for all of it. Now, before we get Jon Stinchcomb, let me also get ready to go around the DawgHouse, poured today by our friends at Dr. Pepper. And one of the things we talked about on Friday's show were those impact freshmen, first-year players to the program that I think can make an immediate impact at Georgia. That list should be smaller because those players are younger. Today, we're going to look at the next group. These are second-year players, whether they be, true sophomores or technically redshirt freshmen. For the most part, I don't really distinguish much between a redshirt freshman and a sophomore, just given the current definitions of those two phrases. But there ought to be a few more sophomores than freshmen when it comes to guys who can break out, guys who can do some big things for you. So before we bring on Jon Stinchcomb, let's go through some of these names, starting with a guy that Kirby Smart spoke about when he met with the media last week. How about the second-year linebacker, Justin Williams? We think that Williams is one of the most important players on this team. He's in a backup role, but he's a loud vocal leader. He looks great in his uniform, and we think that Williams could be ready to do some big things for the Dogs here this year. This is what Kirby Smart said about Justin Williams just last week.
Probably physically. He came in very intelligent mentally, very instinctive, very bright-eyed, and loves football. He's got every part of the fire, passion, energy we want. He's gotten a little heavier. He came in a little bit lighter. He's gotten a little bit heavier. He's able to take on things. He understands the defense better. He's improving as a tackler. It's one of the areas that he really targets, is getting better at, and he knows he has to work on that to be an effective player. But I'm very pleased with where he is. I was very pleased with where he was last year in terms of coming in and doing what he needed to do.
I think that Justin Williams is a really good player, and I think the entire SEC is going to find that out this year. It's also, I think, interesting that Williams is oftentimes thought of in a tandem with one of two players. One of those guys is the guy that Williams went to high school with, both coming from the state of Texas, and that's Joseph Jonah Ajonye. JJA, if we want to call him that, it doesn't exactly roll off the tongue, but maybe, was injured a good bit last season. I don't know that we saw the best of Joseph Jonah Ajonye. He was also a first-year player of the program. But you talk about another guy that just looks great. Joseph Jonah Ajonye looks great. And I do believe, position of need for Georgia, you got to have the defensive end emerge. This is where Georgia oftentimes does some of its best work defensively when it has the guy that properly fills this position. Man, I believe that Joseph Jonah Ajonye could be pretty well known by Georgia fans before this season is done. We think of him and Justin Williams going together because of the fact they came into Georgia together. And the other day, the aforementioned Justin Williams talked about what he likes about Joseph Jonah Ajonye. This is what Jay Will said about JJA, if you're following my drift.
I've seen him just be resilient. I mean, that's one of our traits, resiliency. And Joseph, he's literally the person I know just always being resilient. When he had his injury, I seen him we still continue to lift weights, continue to go work on his pass rush, continue to do stuff. And they had to tell him to slow down, because you injured Joe. But you can expect a lot from him. He works really hard. In the summer, he was telling me to get up off my butt and go work out and do stuff like that. So you can expect a lot from him for sure.
So far we got two. Justin Williams is on my list. Joseph Jonah-Ajonye is on my list. Second-year players that I think are kind of in line for some big things for Georgia here this year. Let me give you a third quickly, then we'll talk more to Jon Stinchcomb about this. It's another guy that we often think of as going in a pair with Justin Williams, and that's Chris Cole. Cole and Williams both came in together as linebackers around the same time. They are both, let's face it, remarkable talents who it's sort of an embarrassment of riches that they would be backups at a place like Georgia. Now, Raylan Wilson and C.J. Allen, who we think of as the starters right now, are, of course, great talents too, but Williams and Cole waiting the wings, they may be just some of Georgia's best players regardless of position. We often think of Williams and Cole going together, and in that same session last week when Justin Williams met with the media, just the same way he talked about Joseph Jonah-Ajonye a moment ago, he also talked about his guy, Chris Cole, too. This is what he said about him.
Okay, I mean, what do you want to hear? We can be here for hours talking about Chris Cole. I love Chris Cole. Chris Cole is just a versatile guy. I mean, he can rush the passer, cover, he can play the run. He can do so many things, and just being his best friend, I mean, I'm great to be surrounded by him. I love him to death. Don't tell him I said that, but that's my dog. Yeah.
So let me sum this all up this way. So if we are making a list of second-year players ready to really thrive at Georgia, Chris Cole, Justin Williams, Joseph Jonah-Ajonye, I think they'd need to be on there. There are lots of examples of Georgia, like all of the best college teams, not quite being as deep maybe as they once were compared to 2021, 2022. That may just be true. And yet there are still some areas in which Georgia has a remarkable level of depth, linebacker being one of them. Is defensive line that way? I don't know. But Georgia could have enough at that position to be a step above where it's been the last 2 years. And if it does go that way, well, clearly Joseph Jonah-Ajonye would play a big role in how they get there. So as we're compiling our list, that trio that we just mentioned, they would have to be on it. And that is around the DawgHouse, poured today by our friends at Dr. Pepper. Now, we are back into football season. You watch games on Saturday, kind of a mess, week 0, but you watch them no less. Well, we're getting ready for week 1, and you better believe I'm going to go be, getting home from Athens, going sitting on the back porch, getting ready to relax, watch some football. And for me, when I'm doing that, I am popping open a can, the rich, one-of-a-kind flavor of Dr. Pepper. I love it. Dr. Pepper and college football, they just go together. It's a pepper thing, as they like to say. And so as you're getting ready to watch football here this year, make sure you stock up on some Dr. Pepper too, whether it's one of the more traditional flavors like I like, or the Dr. Pepper Blackberry and Dr. Pepper Blackberry Zero Sugar that's been such a hot thing over the course of the last few months. Wherever you're shopping, your local Kroger, wherever you pick up your groceries, you can pick up some Dr. Pepper, and you can be just like us. Dr. Pepper, a big part of DawgNation Daily here and around the DawgHouse, a big part of college football, because when it comes to Dr. Pepper and college football, it's a pepper thing. All right, so great show for us. Before we're done, a lot on, speaking of a big weekend coming up for college football, all of those big week 1 games, at least a handful of like the really biggest. We'll talk about those coming up here in just a little bit. But for now, on everything about Georgia, getting ready for week 1 versus Marshall, let's cover all the bases with our guy, the great former Georgia All-American, here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Let me bring on Jon Stinchcomb. Always value his opinion. And Jon, I think for Georgia to be what it needs to be here this year, I think you have got to have a big contribution from your year 2 guys. I honestly don't care if they're redshirt or true sophomores. I feel like we've blurred the lines on some of that because of the new redshirt rule. That's not all that interesting to me. But on Friday's show, I gave a small handful of first-year players that I think could have a chance to really flourish for Georgia. The year 2 list should just, by definition, because now they're more experienced, it should be a larger, more substantial list. So let me begin with the three names I just mentioned. Do you have any problem with two linebackers, Justin Williams, Chris Cole, and a defensive lineman, kind of playing defensive end, Joseph Jonah Ajonye, being year two guys that are more than just on the field? They may be really part of the overall solution for Georgia. You have a problem with anybody in that trio? I'm guessing you probably don't.
I don't. I think they're joined by a list of players that should be making that sophomore leap. Getting to campus, being ready is a difficult task. And, the hopes are that there's a number of players that come in ready and can contribute early. But I think more realistically, what you look at is getting 1 year under your belt in the program, competing against the guys that are playing, and you see the amount of development that happens when they get on campus and they get to compete. And then that next year, they almost come back like different players. I mean, obviously, great list of guys that we haven't seen a lot of that you just provided. I expect them to be more than just contributors. Obviously, in the linebacker position, specifically on the inside, that's a great group. Always has been. I mean, historically, at least under Kirby Smart, probably extends well past that. The linebacking core at Georgia, there's a reason why it's LBU. And it's because the talent is so deep, and the expectations for Justin and Chris Cole are very high this year. But they're not alone. You look at guys that stepped in early. KJ Bolden last year was a contributor. He's supposed to be a cornerstone of this defense, and he's entering in that second year, falls into that same category. And Daniel Calhoun competing against in the offensive line for that guard spot. Number of players entering that second year on campus that should be major contributors.
All right, so let me give you a new name now, and this is a guy, perhaps unlike some of the ones I just mentioned, who I think is going to be a starter for Georgia this year, and I think this could be a great thing for the Dogs. That's Ellis Robinson. I feel like I've heard enough to lead me to believe that Robinson is going to secure the starting cornerback spot, and obviously, for a lot of our audience, John, they know him as the highest-rated individual recruit in Georgia team history. I think we've talked about this before. So that comes with its own level of accolades, and some of that can be unfair, and yet it is just objectively true that he was brought here to be a lockdown corner and to become a future first-round pick. Well, year two can be a big step in that direction. I think, Ellis Robinson needs to be on this list. And after a year ago in which we didn't hear very much, now we're hearing a lot more about him. I think it's actually justifiable to put him on this list. I think that Ellis Robinson is in line for a big year two for these Dogs.
It's funny. It's almost unfair at times for guys like Ellis. DeMello, throw him in there as well. The expectations, that is a tough position to come in day one and be ready to go. The physical traits, his tools, his skill set, that's what gets you that number one ranking across 24/7, and all the recruiting analysts out there. They know what he's capable of. They know he's got one of those high ceilings where you look at the way he can fly around or flew around the field in high school, and you say it's only a matter of time for a player like this. And what I appreciate from Coach Smart and his staff is I think they challenge guys to get as ready and maximize their talents as quickly as possible, but they don't pressure them to get out on the field before they're ready. And part of the beauty is they don't have to. I think you look at the depth that Georgia has. It's a struggle. That's almost like a bugaboo word these days, is depth. Just because of NIL and transfer portals, it's hard to get that depth. It's hard to develop guys. It's hard to get really talented individuals like Ellis to be a part of your program and not force them on the field before they're ready. I think because Georgia's had some players in-house, it has allowed him, at least for a season, to kind of develop without that scrutiny that he probably would have faced elsewhere. And I expect him to be a better player because of it. You get to compete, you get to kind of refine some rough edges behind the scenes, and when it's your time to shine, you can do so glowingly. And I think the expectations are high across the board for a number of players. When you come in as the top recruit in a draft class that is loaded anyway, the expectations are through the roof. And hopefully Ellis lives up to those in the long run, and the expectations are that this year is going to be his year to emerge, and fans will be able to see why he was the number one recruit in that class.
All right, so two more things on this topic. I'm going to mention a couple of running backs here. And this is, on my part, maybe a little bit of wishful thinking. I don't know what kind of season they're set to have. I just believe they're going to play, and so therefore I hope they play well. That's Dwight Phillips and Chauncey Bowens. I'll be honest with you. As someone who tries to read the tea leaves and listen to the rumors, things like that, what I hear about the Georgia running back situation is a little spotty. It's difficult to decipher. It's sometimes quiet. It's a little spotty. Therefore, I think there is space on the field for both Phillips and Bowens. I don't think that Phillips is an every down back, but boy, he could be explosive at the right moments. I think that Chauncey Bowens is maybe taking some strides here. My best guess, earning some playing time for himself. Hopefully he makes good with that opportunity. The defensive names we just mentioned, I'm not saying I'd bet my mortgage, but I feel pretty confident that I like what we just talked about, a bunch of defensive guys that I feel like I really have an idea of what I'm going to get from them. I don't know as much about Bowens and Phillips to go along with another year two guy in Nate Frazier, who I think at this point in time is fairly proven. He had good numbers last year. Phillips and Bowens, I don't know quite as much about, but I do believe they're going to play, and Georgia needs them to play well.
Here's my thing. You got Nate Frazier. He's your bell cow in that position group. So for any of those guys, Phillips, Bowens, Walker, all have had their moments. All have had a little pub at varying times over this past off season. For you to get on the field, there's a name that we've kind of overlooked, Cash Jones, guy that came back for yet another year.
Yep.
He played that third down back role for Georgia and did so admirably. So I think it's for Phillips, there's your competition is, can you raise the bar? Cash was more than serviceable in that role. Can you fill that space of third down back, a little more space creation for you, blitz pickup, those kinds of things? And for a guy like Chauncey, it's more of can you earn the right to take Nate Frazier off the field? So better problems to have than what Georgia has faced in I guess the year past. It's similar to what we saw when the Todd Gurley's backed up by Sony Michel and Nick Chubb. I mean, what a year of riches that was. So you look back and you think of the history of that room and how fantastic it's been. I think we get a little bit spoiled because the expectation is they're all superstars. And I think when you have guys like Nate Frazier, who, when we saw him last year in a limited capacity, I think we all wanted more. And that's the expectation this year, is that he moves into that number one role. And for any of the other backs, you've got to justify to the coaching staff and to your teammates why you're pulling one of those key players off the field and that there's not going to be a drop-off in performance.
I want to give you one more name, and this is a wild card. It kind of comes out of nowhere. And this is not based on like any kind of inside information or anything like that. It's just somebody I'm curious about, and I've kind of always been curious about. I have my eye on Nnamdi Ogboko on the defensive line. Bill Walton, the late, great Bill Walton, as a basketball analyst, would have this thing he'd say on TV sometimes where he would say, it helps to be tall when you're playing this game. And in basketball, it just does help to be tall. Well, guess what? In football, it's good to be big. And Nnamdi Ogboko is huge. He's like 335 pounds or something like that. At least that's what he was coming out of high school. And, the Georgia rush defense could just benefit from a big space-eating defensive lineman in the middle. For all that Jordan Davis did athletically, the other thing about Davis was he was just huge. And Ogboko, I'm not saying he's the next Jordan Davis, maybe far from it. I don't know. I literally don't even know where he ranks on the depth chart. If I had to be honest, I don't know. But boy, I'm curious about him, because if you really wanted to limit, Georgia used to beat teams on the chalkboard. Teams would decide not to run. They would scheme away from running plays because they knew there was just so much beef in the middle of the field that it was a futile effort to even try. They were beating guys in the coach's room. They were taking the running game out of the game plan because of the beef that Georgia had up front. And if Ogboko could earn a few snaps for himself as the big space eater in the middle, I mean, that right there is a pretty good step towards stopping the run game. So we're the only show in the region that's probably talking about Nnamdi Ogboko today. But that's a guy that I got to tell you, if he were to step up, I think the Georgia rushing defense could benefit from it.
And he's a guy that probably won't ever blow up a stat sheet, but you know who will? The linebackers that get to play behind him. I know this. When you look at the variety that a defense can throw at an offense, and when you start in a base 3-4, which, you know, it's all sub-packaged these days anyway, but when you've got a guy across on the center who can take up space, that can eat up blocks, not only the center, a couple of guards in the mix, it frees up your linebackers to make more plays. And that's what I think you saw from Jordan Davis when he was here. You know, he had his individual moments. What he brought to that team more than anything was opportunities for his teammates, whether it was Jalen Carter in that 3-tech or the linebackers behind him to play free without a body on top of them instantly. And for any big body, that the expectation is that you can absorb and eat some of those blocks, and it allows your defense to do a much more diverse set of plays and schemes and ways to attack and various pressures. If you know that the inside of your defense is strong, it's solid. It's such a pain to play against a defense like that when you have someone in the middle. Again, spoiled. Jordan Davis, special. Really special. Somebody who not only took up space, but was a factor and could run. And, you know, not many guys like that. But when you find them, it frees everyone else up around them to play at a much higher, faster level.
All right, I want to shift gears to a different topic. I'm a simple man. I don't have exquisite taste. I enjoy simple pleasures. Simply speaking, John, as I said to start the show today, I want to see Georgia cover 9.5 first quarter points against Marshall. And after that, I sort of don't care. If the game's 28-0 or 31-0 or 45-0 or 100-0, I almost don't care about the final three quarters if Georgia can just be winning 10-0, 14-0, something like that in the first quarter. This is something that Georgia has not really done the last couple of years. Even explosive offense in 2023 didn't really do this very much. Clearly had its issues with this in 2024. This isn't just on the offense, because if the opposing offense goes on a sustained drive, that limits your scoring opportunities. You got to play complementary football. I want Georgia to cover 9.5 first quarter points against Marshall, and it's sort of the only thing I care about for Saturday's game. What do you think?
You know, when you started that, I was like, he's about to give another plug for Dr. Pepper and all their variety of flavors. But if you're talking about taste and preference, what I'd love to see, I think that's great. Starting fast is going to be important, I think, for fans to say, yep, we can rally behind this. We're on board. We're going to make those runs that some of the national pundits out there don't think we're capable of. You know what I'd like to see, BA, is the run game. Impose their will on, first opponent's Marshall. Let's start there. Mm-hmm. If we can start early and dictate a game offensively we're going to impose our will in the run game, and it's going to open up opportunities. Man, what a great start that would be. I think it frees up and liberates. You just talked about a nose guard, a defensive big body opening up things. That's what the run game does on the offensive side of the ball. If they can't stop the run, then you have to add more resources. You have safeties in the box. You have one-on-one matchups on the outside. It frees up things. So on your way to 9.5 plus points in the first quarter, if you can do that by leaning on somebody, when everyone's fresh and everyone's excited to start the year and they still can't do anything about it, I think that's a great sign for Georgia as you start this season.
Stepping away from Georgia for a moment, I'm curious. This is about the best week one I think I can remember. Rich storylines for Texas, Ohio State, Clemson, LSU. You want to get to like Sunday, you're thinking about a Notre Dame, Miami. This is a really, really interesting week one. Is there anything outside of Georgia that you find yourself thinking about when it comes to college football? Because, and look, in some cases, it's important not to overreact. I think there are a couple of cases when overreactions would be just fine. But is there something that's on your mind that you're curious of from a really big kind of smorgasbord of football away from what is obviously not among the more interesting games that Georgia will play this year?
I am excited to see more of this. And this is when SEC's moving to 9 conference games, you get more games that are meaningful throughout the season. I think when I appreciate the fact that we've manufactured 3 great games. You just listed them. I mean, that is exciting weekend of football to kick off the year. They've done a great job of that. I can't wait to see what Texas and Ohio State look like, especially against a quality opponent for both of them. For Ohio State, that's almost a rarity. I mean, most of the times you're saying, yeah, they scored 60, but it's Rutgers. So what do they look like? Texas on paper, arguably the strongest roster in the country. So are they able to put that together early? You know, for a lot of teams that are young, it's a matter of development. And by the end of the season, they're up to speed. They don't really have that luxury. And for teams like Miami that, are trying to break that, floor of teams that matter, and they haven't been above that threshold, these are important weeks when you look at schedules that don't offer a lot of opportunity for upward movement. Sure, they can win all their games, but it's not going to be against quality opponents. So for us, the fans, what a great way to start the year when you've got a number of really meaningful games that I'm planning on scheduling my weekend around so I can catch them. And it's good football.
Yeah, I love it. Now, I know people like the NFL too, and I get that. And yet this weekend pre-NFL, when college football just owns the whole weekend and it kind of goes into Sunday and Monday too, golly, man, that's about as good as it gets.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I'm a little bit of an NFL guy. Certainly wasn't coming up. Certainly wasn't until I participated in it. But there's nothing like college football. It can't be touched. It's special. So to have meaningful games early that I'll watch every Georgia football game there is, and there's very few outside of that hold a lot of interest for me. But yet this weekend, there's a number of games that I'm excited about watching, and my team's not going to be playing in them. So I think they've done a really good job of making it special and understanding that because the NFL's got that down week before they start the season, college football can own not only Saturday, but also Sunday. And like you said, that I will say, when you start making special comment, it's no longer special. So the fact that I love football, but the fact that you have Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday, Monday, now Tuesday game, seems like Wednesday's the only day that they don't touch. You start NFL on Thursday. It might get to that saturation point. Because I'm coming off the off season, I can't wait to have multiple days of football because I'm just jonesing for it a little bit. So I'm excited about that.
I love it, John. Next time we speak, Georgia will have played a game. We'll react to what we saw from them. I'm looking forward to it. Hope you enjoy the weekend. Thank you for being here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia.
We've made it, BA. It's game week.
I love
Go
it.
Dogs.
Love it. Thank you, John. Go Dogs indeed.
Appreciate it.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
We have made it indeed, and I do think, though, week one just has such an incredible vibe. We're going to talk about 3 of those games coming up in a moment, and a couple of those are fairly easy to predict which ones we are going to discuss. I just think rich with storylines. We'll get into that. But first, let's go cruise around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And speaking of rich with storylines, anytime I come back from a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation, I've got all kinds of stories to tell. And some of my best stories involve Perfect Day Coco Cay. It is the private island oasis exclusive for those on a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation. And y'all know I'm very brand loyal when it comes to Royal Caribbean. I'm a big fan of Royal Caribbean, and this is the thing that I love about Royal Caribbean more than anything else. I love all the new ships. That's really exciting for me. But going to Perfect Day KOKK, this is the thing that makes a Royal Caribbean cruise vacation certainly unlike any other cruise vacation, if not any other vacation you can take. That's how special I think the thrill side with the tallest water slide in North America is, the chill side with like the Oasis Lagoon, all the relaxation opportunities, or if you're thinking about Hideaway Beach, if you want the Vegas pool party vibe, just so many great things to do when you're on Perfect Day KOKK, the awesome private island exclusive for those on a Royal Caribbean cruise ship. Jessica Slater, great travel advisor, can tell you all about it. She can book your Royal Caribbean cruise vacation today. Give her a call, 770-718-9147. That's 770-718-9147. You can also email her, jslater@dreamvacations.com. Okay, let's get into it, and let's start with Texas going to Ohio State on Saturday. Two very simple points about this game. Thing number one, this game for me is not a referendum on the defending national champions or the upstart Texas Longhorns. Ohio State hosting Texas is fundamentally a referendum on the media. And this game will determine to what degree the national media that covers college football is just broken. Because this is what we've heard over the course of the last few months, is that Arch Manning, who has not yet had his first full season as Texas starting quarterback, is already better than Tim Tebow. And that Texas, as The Athletic wrote the other day, is the new Alabama, despite the fact that Texas in this era hasn't won a national championship. Somehow they're already the new Alabama. Well, guess what? The supposed new Alabama with the new Tim Tebow is actually an underdog in week one. Now, that to me just speaks of the improperly cast narrative around this game, that there is an element of try hard to push the talking point on Texas that actually isn't borne out by the early projection for the game. Essentially on a neutral field, Texas and Ohio State are basically viewed as even teams, slight favorite Ohio State because it's playing at home. But nonetheless, for all the hype that Texas has gotten, somehow they are an underdog on the road in week one. I think that speaks to the problems that exist with the narrative cast around Texas. However, if I'm also being honest, I do believe that Texas wins this game. My simple reason for feeling that way is that we always want to be careful about storylines that change very quickly. Because once storylines change, people have a tendency to forget they ever thought something different. But about Ohio State, until about 5 minutes ago, people thought this was a team under Ryan Day that couldn't win the big game. After all, they had not advanced the college football playoff. They weren't beating their hated rival Michigan. And because they won last year's playoff, suddenly you're not hearing, at least apart from the Michigan part, you're not hearing that very much anymore. But we're always really careful about one game proving too much of any one thing. And in actuality, it's Texas over the course of the last couple of years without a national championship that probably has proven a bit more than Ohio State has. Doesn't seem like that should be true. I believe that it is. Texas has been in the Final Four the last 2 years. It won a big road game at Alabama in 2023. That's a similar situation to what it'll find itself in on Saturday. So I believe that Texas will win. But if it doesn't, the national media that covers college football should be rightly viewed as broken. Because you can't hype up Arch Manning this much, and you can't hype up Texas this much, and have them lose week one. That would be embarrassing if this body had any ability to feel any shame whatsoever. Moving on to the other, among many, big games for this particular weekend, this one also on Saturday. It's Clemson hosting LSU. Now, we just talked about the tendency to react too loudly or in some cases overreacting. In the case of LSU and Clemson, I think almost any overreaction to the final result of this game is probably justified. Now, I just made my pick for Texas and Ohio State. I'm not quite ready yet to make my prediction for LSU-Clemson, but I believe I know which direction I'm going to go in. I think I know. Not quite ready to make that prediction yet. But whether LSU wins or Clemson wins, I think almost any overreaction is justified. Let's game this out. If LSU wins, this is an example of a Clemson team doing what it has done a lot lately. Everyone has acted as if Clemson is this national championship favorite, seemingly forgetting that while Clemson did make the playoff again last year for the first time since 2020, it also lost 4 times, and it lost to the 4 best teams that it played. If it were to lose to LSU on Saturday, this is just seemingly a continuation of what Clemson has been. The team that's more than capable of beating anyone in the ACC, but not quite lately capable of beating the very best teams from the SEC and the other top teams in college football. Didn't beat Texas last year, didn't beat South Carolina last year, got blown out by Georgia. Just that's kind of what Clemson has been. And if they were to lose against LSU on Saturday, it would seem that is what Clemson still is. On the flip side of that, though, this is an LSU team that has put a lot of eggs in the week 1 basket. Embarrassingly, it lost to USC last year, also lost to not great Florida State teams in back-to-back seasons the 2 years prior to that. Week 1 losses to non-conference foes have been, I would say, among the main things that have kept LSU from being considered among the national elite thus far in the Brian Kelly era. They have said they want that to change against Clemson this year. And yet they're also on the road. They are a somewhat sizable favorite. It's more than a field goal. If LSU loses after putting a lot of emphasis on beating Clemson in week 1, I think it'd be an example. This is one of the reasons why coaches so rarely specifically speak about their goals, because Brian Kelly would be cast as a failure already just 1 week into the season. That's why I say either way here, and this is what makes this game fun for those of us who are not coaching, playing in it, or a hardcore fan of one of these 2 teams. Either outcome on Saturday gives you plenty of room for overreaction. You better believe that's what we love. All right, one final game to mention. I mentioned this just simply because it's among the first big games involving an SEC team. Auburn goes to Baylor. Now, we say a lot that we try to limit our discussion about point spreads, not often successfully. We've talked about point spreads frequently in today's show, for instance. Sometimes, though, point spreads can be extraordinarily interesting. I think this is an example of that. Auburn is a team right now, certainly in our part of the country, if not nationwide, that does not have much of a reputation. Not a very good one anyway. And yet, did you know that Auburn's a 2.5-point favorite on the road against Baylor on Friday? It's a Baylor team that won 8 games last year. This is a Baylor team that finished with 6 straight regular season wins before losing to LSU in a bowl game. Dave Aranda is a coach that SEC fans know pretty well. I would say, no matter what the outcome ends up being, Auburn being favored in this spot almost by a key number of 3, although just below, I'd say that's an interesting statement, one that you ought to pay attention to, even if you don't care the first thing about gambling. The people who crunch the numbers, the people who put their money where their mouth is, in other words, if they're wrong, they stand to lose financially because of their incorrect prediction, it seems like now they think Auburn is better than the public at large does. That's a potential word of warning for Georgia that plays at Auburn in October, but it's also just an interesting data point to consider. Hugh Freeze has been a laughingstock. All the golf that he supposedly played in the offseason, him saying that he may play 3 quarterbacks in week 1. There's this bizarre controversy about who the offensive coordinator actually is. Auburn just sort of feels like the kind of program that, I don't know, they can't shoot straight right now. They just sort of feel a little sloppy. That Hugh Freeze hasn't quite established himself there, even though he has SEC experience. Most people think that Auburn is a joke. As of now, no one is laughing in the sports books because they are favored at Baylor, a Baylor team that's maybe better than you realize, looking at its record from last season, McLean Stadium being the spot hosting this game on Friday. No pick yet in this one, but it's worth considering that those who look a little closer see a little more when they view Auburn than some of y'all maybe do. So be careful with that, and we'll make that cruising around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Now, speaking of making predictions and doing all that kind of stuff, we got a fun way for you to get involved with some great predictions right now. And all of this comes to us courtesy of our friends at Kroger. A lot of good stuff to kick off the season. This is an awesome thing. Kroger's going to give you a chance to make some season predictions online at DawgNation.com. Here's what you need to do. Just got to make your picks, basically. So by going there, making your picks, you have a chance to win some prizes, including like $500 worth of prizes here. So simply go to DawgNation.com/contest. Enter your picks by this Friday. That's the day before the Georgia season begins. And you could win your chance at $500 in prizes. It's a great Dog Nation season predictions contest. It all comes courtesy of our friends at Kroger. We've done this before. People love it. It's back here again for 2025. And it's not complete until you get your picks in. So go to, one more time, let me give it to you. DawgNation.com/contest. That's DawgNation.com/contest, and participate in the season win prediction contest courtesy of our friends at Kroger. And as we wrap up here today, let's give you a golden shoe. We were laughing a little bit on Saturday because Dan Mullen, the former Florida coach, made his debut at UNLV. Running Rebels, speaking of point spreads, were a massive favorite. Home city of Vegas had listed them as more than a 30-point favorite, I want to say, against Idaho State. And yet for a long portion of this game, it seemed like UNLV might not win. Ultimately, it did, but it was a sloppy mess. And we were laughing about that. I was making fun of it on X, and one of our good buddies here, Sugar Ray, wrote in to me saying, nobody does Gator hating more than DawgNation Daily. Yeah, we love still laughing at the old Dan Mullen, and our buddy Sugar Ray brings back an oldie but a goodie when it comes to Mullen toting that L. He did get the win for UNLV on Saturday, but we would say you can't spell UNLV without the L, and certainly Dan Mullen has plenty of those. So we'll give Sugar Ray a golden shoe for that. And by the way, speaking of the lousy, stinking Gators, the long losing streak they have against Georgia dates back to the Mullen era, about 1,752 days. That's how long it's been since Florida's beaten Georgia. That is our Gator Hater Updater. We do it every day. We believe a good Georgia fan is a Gator hater first and foremost. We love laughing at them, and they give us plenty to laugh about. So have a great day. We'll see you back here tomorrow. Game week rolling on. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window in Door, Georgia. We'll look forward to talking to you then. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. R.S. Andrews is the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised, the price is promised. You can trust them on that. Okay, let's get your comments. From the chat, we'll find out what's on your mind. B.A. Scardigan pointing out that there is a lot of coaching changeover for Ohio State. And it's not just coaching changeover. It's, in the case of Jim Knowles now at Penn State, Knowles was thought to be among the best defensive coordinators in the sport, was certainly paid that way. You're going from a very experienced Chip Kelly to a rookie guy in Brian Hartline. Hartline, a great recruiter, the architect of that remarkable wide receiver room that Ohio State always has. Kind of first time being an offensive coordinator. Ohio State seemed to get better when Ryan Day became the true full-fledged head coach, giving up the play calling duties. But is he going to be able to go a whole season without doing that with Ohio State right now? Maybe Brian Hartline's the best offensive coordinator there ever was. That is a challenge, though. It is a challenge. And in week one, Texas is certainly a lot more. There's more continuity for the Texas program than that. Yeah, Green Soldier supporting Jim Knowles as a top DC. Good to see Green Soldier in here today. Wyatt Fielding says we're going to be before the game on Saturday. Looking forward to being in and around the dog walk area. Of course, we'll have our DawgNation Game Day pregame show with Kaylee Manziel from Jittery Joe's on Saturday. That should be fun, too. Thomas Tyson on the subject of Brian Hartline and the still very much unknown commodity as Ohio State's offensive coordinator, that is certainly true. Alan Hampton says, please be careful if you dabble in gambling. Just talked to a guy at my gym that has put his family life in jeopardy because he let it get out of hand. And Alan, this is something we've talked about a lot over the course of the summer. I think that point spreads can be really fun. And I do think understanding what odds makers are projecting gives the eventual outcome just some additional context that I think makes it interesting. But I am quite aware of how problematic this has turned out to be for a lot of people. And, when we talk about responsibility around this topic, I want it to be more than just the boilerplate language of, hey, if you have a problem, dial 1-800, blah, blah, blah. That's just a cop-out. That's legalese to absolve the company from responsibility. I want to come at this from a lot more human place than that. I'll give you a for instance. So I made 2 picks on Friday's show. I took Hawaii minus 2.5 against Stanford. That covered. And I took UNLV team total over 48.5. Well, that didn't come close. So I took 2 what you call straight bets. Theoretically, a straight bet has a 50% chance of winning. And I don't care what somebody says. It's all basically a 50% proposition. That no one is beating the market to the tune of, the worst sports bettor in the world is still going to get about 50% of his picks correct. The best sports bettor is going to hit somewhere around 55%. All of this is within a couple of percentage points of being a 50-50 proposition. It just is. It can be fun, done responsibly. It's no different than any other hobby, but it's all basically a 50% proposition. And anyone who tries to act different is just hyping themselves up and could be verifiably proven to be wrong. The point, though, is, so if you make 2 straight bets, different, for instance, than a parlay where you do not have anywhere close to a 50% chance of winning. If you make 2 straight bets, 50% chance of winning, you only have a 25% chance of losing both bets. This is where you can be a little bit more responsible. And a small wager, 2 straight bets, 25% chance of losing both, 25% chance of winning both, and a 50% chance of breaking even, which would allow you to live on and make another play with the money that you save. To me, that's the kind of conversation that ought to happen a bit more regularly, which is, so much of that action is designed for you to lose, where you are paying a price for odds that are far worse than the actual odds of occurring are. That small wagers carefully placed on actual 50-50 propositions as opposed to something that's a lot more of a long shot than that. I think there can be some safety around that, and done responsibly, I don't think it's different than any other hobby. But man, you look at some of the news coverage that comes out, about 5% of bettors, we're told, are responsible for about 50% of the revenue for these sports books. That's really scary to consider what that looks like in real life. It just is. And as a Christian, it can be kind of hard to justify, but that's why we encourage folks to be careful. G. Gray says, know your priorities. I gamble from time to time. Be responsible. And as G says, and as Alan said, that's not just when I was a kid, gambling talk was not really allowed on TV. And so the one tagline they'd always give, and it became a joke, they'd say, for entertainment purposes only. That just became the catch-all way to protect yourself because you weren't supposed to talk about gambling. Well, now all of these TV networks and any podcast you ever listen to almost are totally tied into gambling. It's no longer passé to discuss. And like a lot of things in life, the legalization of it has probably had a net negative impact. but no different. The point we're getting to is it's more than just a tagline to say, be responsible, know when to say when. It's more than just a tagline to say that. Our genuine hope and prayer is that if you do choose to do that, and people are going to choose, it's going to happen. People are going to do it. A sizable portion of the public is going to do this no matter what. So for those who will, more than just a throwaway statement, our hope is that you do choose to be responsible. Bo Molinari says, Jimmy the Great turned me on to gambling as a child. Yeah, I guess that was the first famous guy on TV that was a little more open about some of it. But even then, it was veiled language. It had to be, and this is what a little bit later on, this is what Lee Corso would always do. You know, Corso would always say, closer than the experts think. That was code language for the underdog is going to cover. It became a catchphrase. Hey, watch out, closer than the experts think. That was just code language for the underdog is going to cover. That's the way that gambling used to be talked about on TV. It obviously doesn't have to be spoken about that way anymore. All right, let me go back to DawgNation.com in that chat. UJ Marine talking about the SEC schedule, obviously going to 9 games. He said he wouldn't mind going to 10 games. When you look at our best memories of a season and what typically ranks pretty high on the most watched games, a lot of this is going to be SEC versus SEC competition. This seems to be the inventory that people just like the best. And therefore, I do believe there ought to be more of it. My advice to Georgia, all these non-conference series you have scheduled, the one-off stuff, Ohio State, some of the stuff with Clemson, just can't. I would say cancel them all. I would say cancel them all because Georgia right now doesn't get credit for winning them. Last year, Georgia beat Clemson 34-3. Got no credit for doing so. 2022 beat Oregon 49-3. Got no credit for doing so. That was not part of the ongoing narrative about what Georgia was in either of those 2 seasons. And so therefore, if you're not going to get credit for the game, you might as well not play it. Also, if the Big Ten had its way with automatic qualifiers into the postseason, you would have non-conference games, but the results wouldn't matter. They would be glorified exhibitions. At that point, all you're doing is risking injury. I would definitely encourage you not to play games under those circumstances. BA's Headphones writes in to say, I saw a few minutes ago where Texas is placing its partners, is it Human, is it the name? Logo on the 25-yard line. Guess we will see where the NIL money is coming from. Some of it anyway. Yeah, there's obviously more of this coming around college football. Georgia has more signage on the field, around the field than it used to. There's definitely more of this coming, no doubt about that. Some things bother me, some things don't. Signage on the field bothers me less than any kind of insignia on the uniform. Eventually, that's probably coming too. Brandon Griffin says the youth on this team is both unnerving and exciting at the same time. I'm excited to see what they can do. So I'm probably dumb. Sometimes I am, not dumb on purpose. Oftentimes I'm just pretending to be smart. But the thing that I just keep coming back to that confuses me is people talk about Georgia being a young team, and Kirby Smart has said 54% of these players in their first or their second year. And I'm not trying to be sarcastic. I'm being serious. Isn't that a relatively normal distribution? If you've got first, second, and third and fourth year players, no more COVID guys, 54% being first or second year, that would include both sophomores and redshirt freshmen. Isn't that about normal? I think what's probably true is center's an example of this, where key backups may be younger than Georgia's used to them being. That may be true. But overall, isn't the distribution of age actually about what it's supposed to be? I know Kirby Smart has talked a lot about this, but I have to admit, I don't quite know the point he's trying to make with that. Yeah, UJ Marina does not like the corporate logos in the field. I don't know why that doesn't bother me quite as bad. I'm not one of these people that thinks all companies are gross or all branding is gross or, without getting into topics we don't discuss, I like capitalism. I like markets. I like businesses. I'm thankful for them. There are some things, though, kind of like the old, when you see it type of situation where it can be taken too far and it can be too much. I am not against all branding in all ways, but there are some branding things that just feel like an assault on the eyes. I don't like that the Braves have a corporate logo on their uniform. I don't have anything against the company that it's on there. I just don't like it. I would say that uniforms are more sacred for me than fields are. And I think part of the reason why is think about the fields and stadiums that this actually just came to my head. But think about the fields and stadiums that we would view to be sacred. I would say that Fenway Park is one of those for me. Well, what's the most famous thing about Fenway Park? It's the Green Monster. Well, what's the second most famous thing about Fenway Park? Your mileage may vary. I would suggest it's the Citgo sign that's behind Fenway Park. When you actually go to Boston, you realize the Citgo sign's farther away from the stadium than you might think. But when I think about a ball sailing over the Green Monster, I think about the Citgo sign. And so therefore, we're used to corporate stuff being connected to stadiums. Some of the same stuff with, Wrigley Field, for instance, big Budweiser sign out in the center field. That when we think of cherished, hallowed grounds in sports, we think about corporate logos being affixed to that. So painting it into the grass doesn't feel like a huge leap for me from what we have been. But gosh, I just think the corporate logos make the uniforms look uglier. And there was a big thing with me on social media the other day about I don't like the newest Georgia G. I compared it to the awful rebrand for Cracker Barrel. I don't like the new Georgia G. A lot of Georgia fans do. I don't like it quite as much. And my son's 13. We talk about uniforms all the time. It's amazing how we just see the uniform world different. We both have strong opinions on uniforms, but we just don't like the same uniforms. It is a generational divide. And that nothing probably divides the generations of sports fans more so than uniforms, things like that. But I think that the world ought to be made not more brutalist, not more minimalist, but more beautiful. And, sports uniforms, I think, are one of the things that makes sports beautiful. And I want to protect that beauty if we possibly can. All right. Roger Allen Martin says I'm the one that's pumping up Mike Bobo daily. My only point about Mike Bobo is I do think that Bobo is probably better than he's been given credit for. I also have a weird theory about Mike Bobo. It's a very weird theory. I would compare Mike Bobo a little bit to like a Nickelback or something like that. Nickelback is not the worst rock band of all time. I don't know that there is a worse rock band of all time. That's an unknowable thing. Nickelback is famous for being thought of as bad. Do you understand the difference? There is no such thing as the worst rock band ever. Nickelback has had some hits. They have some fans. Almost measurably so, it's untrue that Nickelback is the worst anything. But they are famous for being disliked. They are famous for being mocked. I would suggest there is something similarly true about Mike Bobo. The truth is all offensive coordinators are disliked. Being an offensive coordinator is a really hard job. I would say it's harder than being a head coach in some circumstances because there's a lot of different ways to be a good head coach. There's only one way to be a good offensive coordinator. You've got to have a very productive offense. And so broadly speaking, offensive coordinators are just always more unpopular than their counterparts because fans notice the offensive coordinators. Oftentimes, it's the easiest thing to second guess. Any play that doesn't work just seems stupid. And somehow, I would relate this to the fact that he's just been in our lives for such a long time. Mike Bobo, a little bit like Nickelback, is just famous for being unliked, but I don't, also like Nickelback, think that makes him more unliked than the average offensive coordinator. I just don't. He's just more well-known for being unliked. That may be the craziest thing you've ever heard, but that is my heartfelt opinion. Bo Molinari said he would listen to Nickelback over Florida-Georgia line. So I can tell you this. Unashamedly, I do listen to a lot of what people think of as bro country. That's another thing that gets mercilessly mocked online. I listen to a lot of bro country, and at least when I'm like exercising, working out, something like that. And like I try to figure out, like, why do I do this? And I have determined, I think the reason why I do listen to it is because a lot of people don't. I think I might have gravitated towards it because a lot of people don't like it. What is Roger Allen Martin saying about me? What did I do? I can't quite tell what that is. Let me see if I can pop over to Facebook here for a moment. Thomas Tyson says, where's the smoke for Glenn Schumann? His unit vastly underperformed last year. I think some of that, vastly underperformed. I guess we'd have to get into the semantic definition of vastly underperformed. It was not an elite unit. That's certainly the case. And it's supposed to be. But if there is a difference in perception, I think almost all of that is solely owed to, as I just mentioned, the difference between the way offensive and defensive coordinators are handled. DawgHouse Lawn Care says, listening to bro country and walking in a neighborhood with a robot mowers is a slippery slope. Well, if anybody's going to be against the robot mowers, it's going to be our buddy DawgHouse Lawn Care, who we love. I haven't actually seen the robot mower in a while. We talked about that back in the summer too. I haven't seen the robot mower in a while. But I'd listened to some bro country just last night. And you know what? I really liked it. I can't quite tell what that is. That's funny, DawgHouse, though. I'm glad you're here. Thomas Tyson says, I always read his hyperbolic comments. Here's the thing. I love the hyperbolic comments. I think it's interesting. Some of y'all really put yourself out there in comments every now and then. I think that's really good. I think that's great. Makes the comment section better. Spencer Clark says Gunnar Stockton may win the Heisman Trophy. Who knows? That's a hyperbolic comment too, which is fun. Ken Holcomb also does not like the logo in the Braves uniform, the corporate sponsor. Yeah, I don't enjoy that. I also don't like, because a lot of the PGA Tour golfers, by the way, shout out to Tommy Fleetwood winning the Tour Championship. I like simple logo. If you ever go like a really fancy country club, which I don't, but if you ever do, it's interesting that a lot of really fancy country clubs won't let you wear big logos. That you'd have to go to a pretty fancy one for them to really care. But trust me, some of y'all do. You've been to fancy country clubs before. Some of y'all go to there all the time. If you go to a fancy enough country club, they won't let you wear big logos. They don't want, big thing, all over the place. They don't like that. They want simple, small logos. Well, a lot of the PGA Tour golfers, even though branded stuff that's just part of that sport and kind of always has been. I don't like when I see 3 or 4 different logos in the PGA Tour guys. I don't mind it on the NASCAR, but I don't like it for PGA Tour either. So I'm kind of equal opportunity on some of that. I'm not even against the companies. As I told you before, I like business. I like markets. Goodness knows we like marketing, but Mark Woodmansey, by the way, says he may win the golden shoe if he can ever get past his laziness and put something funny on X. Well, I'd love it, Mark. We'd always accepting new submissions. Always accepting new submissions. But the point is, to finish the point I was making before, that anytime a uniform or a golf fit or something like that, anytime it starts to get sloppy, I just don't like it. Good to see Tennille Calvino checking in. Jim Blair says, go Dogs from Moultrie, home of the Colquitt County Packers this week, taking on North Gwinnett. Jim, I don't know if you know, but I'll have the play-by-play call for Colquitt County traveling up 75-85 to Sewanee on Friday night to take on North Gwinnett. We'll see you for Atlanta News First on Friday as Colquitt County takes on North Gwinnett. Anytime you get Metro Atlanta, North Georgia versus South Georgia, it's as good as it gets. I am as excited about that game as anything we'll do all year long, for sure. Matthew Goodwin says he thinks that Gunner could set the Georgia season record for the highest yards per pass average, not necessarily the highest passing yards. My belief about Gunner Stockton remains, I think that he will be as good as the typical Georgia quarterback. And if he is, I think that is plenty good for Georgia to be as good as it wants to be this year. There's a weird thing in now 10 years worth of Kirby Smart being the Georgia coach, where it seems like Georgia has these wildly different quarterbacks, but their actual single season numbers or their season-long numbers end up being pretty similar, that it seems like, well, Carson Beck and Stetson Bennett couldn't be more different, and Jake Fromm and JT Daniels couldn't be more different. But if you extrapolate Daniels for a full season, if you look at Beck and Bennett and all these guys, they're pretty similar. And I think Gunner probably will be too. Gregory Bradley asked him at the radio booth. Josh Brock is the new color analyst. Eric Zier just busy with his family, I understand, which I certainly don't know all about. Busy with his family, got a lot going on the weekends, wanted to step away for a while, hopefully not forever, but wanted to step away for a while, and so Georgia was kind enough to grant that to him. What else? Miriam Corbin has revealed some important information. Is it Tennille's birthday? Tennille, happy birthday. Tennille, I am so happy to be celebrating your birthday with you today. I'm glad you're here as always. Happy birthday, Tennille. All right, a couple of final comments before we go. Funny stuff over on YouTube. Green Soldier going back to Gunner Stockton's time at Rabun County. Yeah, no doubt a very productive player back then. I saw him in person. He also proved to be very tough. I think it's appropriate to kind of keep all this in the context of what it needs to be. It needs to be good. What it doesn't have to be. Doesn't have to be Joe Burrow. And the steps that have been taken to give Gunner everything that he needs. In other words, when you look ahead to year one of Gunner Stockton, this is not a decision that Georgia made flippantly. They didn't just say, we're going to throw a first-year quarterback out there and he's going to be fine. They have tried to recommit themselves to the running game as a way of helping Gunner Stockton. They have brought in new blood at the wide receiver position as a way of helping Gunner Stockton. If we're being honest, of those two things, the sense that we get is one of them has been a smashing success. I do believe the new talent is going to allow Georgia to greatly upgrade its wide receiver situation compared to a year ago. Is the running game, which Georgia has stated as a major offseason goal, is it going to be way better? Right now, I cannot quite tell. I can't tell. I can promise you that of the handful of offseason issues that we have repetitively evaluated, not all of them are likely to break in Georgia's direction. This may be one of the ones that that doesn't. And if it doesn't, the Georgia offense is going to suffer because of it. Seemingly, Gunnar Stockton will suffer because of it. He will not be as good a quarterback if he doesn't have a running game to lean on, or as good of running game as Georgia wants him to have. That's just true. But all of that goes back to what we've also been saying, that it's about how Gunnar fits into the offense overall more so than somehow big spotlight on Gunnar Stockton. Don't fall prey for that. There is not a person in this audience, in this chat, that is, let me flip it around and say it this way. All of you in the chat, you all know way more about Georgia football than the kind of people who only fixate on quarterback because that's the only name they know. There are plenty of people that they don't know anything but coach and quarterback, and so therefore everything that takes place is a referendum on quarterback because that's the only name they know. Y'all are better than that. You really are. And we're obviously going to talk about Gunnar Stockton a lot because he is the quarterback, and quarterback is still the most important position. But it's not exponentially more important at a place like Georgia, just not. So quarterback will be one of the things we talk about along with the other things we discuss. Don't fall prey to the sort of fine bomb, low information, everything's a referendum on the one name that everybody knows. Be better than that, because I know you are. All right. We are going to go. Anything else before we leave? Maybe not. Yeah, I think we're about good. All right, we're going to go for today. Good stuff as always. Thank you for being here. We really appreciate that. And check out R.S. Andrews online. By the way, confirmation, we didn't need it, but we now have it. Go with the Flow returns again this year. Picks for all the big games coming up, including Georgia. Can't wait. One of my favorite things that we do. It's really fun. And looking forward to defending my title. 3 years in a row, maybe? 2 years in a row at least. So looking forward to that. And we'll hope to see you there for it. Of course, it's brought to you by R.S. Andrews, the same folks who bring our R.S. Andrews cool down to you. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric. That's what R.S. Andrews does. You can find them online. Get your AC unit tuned up to factory fresh specs. Long, early fall of very hot weather still to come. So stay comfortable as you're watching all these games right there at your home. Our friends at R.S. Andrews can help you do that. Find them online, rsandrews.com. Have a great day. Back tomorrow. Live from Cercheros and Alfredo tomorrow. Can't wait for that. We'll see you there. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. We'll look forward to talking to you soon.